The organization is called Media Matters, and Media Matters is a news organization that's a nonprofit that's funded by radicals and wealthy socialist billionaires and millionaires because they're able to put propaganda that's socialist, propaganda that's straight from the KGB, propaganda that socialist billionaires like George Soros wants to get out to the public. Media Matters literally influences the majority of the media that you watch, that you hear, that you read about, and newspapers from television news anchors. If we just open our eyes and ears, we could see the very same propaganda word for word from ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, and PBS. So when you listen to the national news, don't be surprised that Media Matters has influenced it, and the way they present the news as well. Even the Democrat-controlled White House has used Media Matters to push information that's not been investigated, not been researched independently. What if you discover that the majority of the news that you watched, that you looked at, was controlled and influenced by one media organization? How would that change your viewing habits? Once you realize that one organization has the power to influence all media and provide a conduit for government to spill their propaganda to all Americans simultaneously, you know that we have a government-controlled media that you cannot trust, and therefore we must do our own research.
An exclusive and shocking information about the people running Media Matters for America, the liberal blog dedicated to destroying Fox News. Our next guest sat down with former and current Media Matters employees and discovered some unsettling facts about the website's leaders and their connections to the White House and the mainstream media. Joining us right now is Fox News contributor and the writer of that report, the Daily Caller's Tucker Carlson. Good morning to Tucker.
Morning, Steve.
Let's start at the beginning. Why is Media Matters out to destroy Fox News and some others?
Well, for two reasons. First, for ideological reasons. Media Matters is a self-described progressive organization, left-wing organization, wants to see a left-wing monopoly on media. Second, its donors give a lot of money in order to hit Fox. We've got a week-long series going on. We have internal memos we're going to be releasing later in the week that put a little finer point on this, but the bottom line is Media Matters has decided it can make the most money by attacking Fox, and has.
Now keep in mind, folks, this is a tax-exempt organization, and let's talk a little bit about what they're doing. In your report today, you say that Media Matters, it does appear, coordinates with the White House.
Yes.
That's big.
Yes, it is big, and it's proved. In June of 2010, David Brock, the founder and head of Media Matters, went to the White House and met with Valerie Jarrett, perhaps the president's closest advisor, Anita Dunn, the former White House communications director. Since then, the Media Matters organization has had a weekly conference call with the White House. There's also a weekly meeting of progressive groups that is in some sense orchestrated by the White House, almost always a White House representative at that meeting. And if you follow statements by Media Matters, they mirror statements by the White House about Fox, for instance, and vice versa. There's no question there's close coordination. Okay,
also there seems to be close coordination with the mainstream media, and what you say is Media Matters, which I think is going to spend $20 million this year trying to influence media. Apparently, whatever Media Matters gives a couple of mainstream media outlets, they print it. Greg Sargent, you say, at the Washington Post, Ben Smith, when he was at Politico, and MSNBC, Media Matters is pretty much right in their prime time.
That's a verbatim quote from a Media Matters staffer. We pretty much write their prime time. When we call Phil Griffin, at the head of MSNBC, he takes our call. We knew that there was coordination between Media Matters and a lot of news organizations. We were shocked by the degree of that coordination. You got to say, whatever else you say about the group, Media Matters has been awfully effective in getting its message out. There are a lot of liberal reporters out there, a lot of willing hands, eager to do the bidding of Media Matters, it turns out.
Meanwhile, the guy at the top, David Brock, who makes a lot of money doing this, you describe him as viciously mean, unstable. You talk about mental illness.
Yes.
This guy, he's paranoid. He's got a couple of bodyguards with him all the time because he's positive that he is the target of an assassination attempt.
Yes, that there are right-wing, unseen right-wing assassins lurking in the shadows trying to knock him off. We open the story with a scene where he's smoking a cigarette on the roof of his building in downtown Washington, a very safe place, and his two bodyguards rush up and whisk him downstairs for fear of, quote, snipers. His personal assistant carried a handgun to various events, including in Washington, D.C., where that's completely illegal. He carried a concealed Glock with no permit because David Brock needed the protection in the view of David Brock. So yes, we have many people who work for David Brock telling us that the atmosphere there is paranoid. And I don't think that's too strong a word.
Right, and I understand, according to your report, a Media Matters for America employee learned about the gun and was fired because hey, he can't be carrying around a gun in D.C. Also, let's talk a little bit about your sources, because people are going to go, oh, he's probably just making that stuff up. You say your sources are people who currently work at Media Matters.
If you read the piece, you get the sense, and it's accurate, that we talk to an awful lot of people in and around Media Matters who have a lot of details about how that organization runs. Almost all of them didn't want to give us their names because, frankly, a lot of them are still committed progressives. They're still left-wingers. They still believe in the cause, but they're very, very concerned about the leadership of David Brock. That's what this came down to. David Brock, it turns out, has a lot of people who disagree with the way he's running that organization and who are really concerned about his stewardship of it, and that's why they spoke to us.
Okay, so you got sources inside and people who have left Media Matters. For the people inside Media Matters, do they still believe in the mission?
They do. I mean, I actually spoke to someone last night who said, look, we've made our point about Fox. It's time to move on. We're supposed to be a media watchdog organization. And this person was frustrated because the money from donors comes when Media Matters attacks Fox. But this person's view was there are a lot of other things we could be writing about, and we ought to be doing that. So, again, there's frustration with Brock's stewardship. This is part of a week-long series. We're going to have a lot more details. But bottom line, yeah, there are a lot of frustrated people there who called us.
And is this how a tax-exempt operation is supposed to operate? I don't think so. All right,
that's something else we'll be taking up later in the week.
All right. Tucker, we'll read all about it at the Daily Caller. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Steve.
Media Matters has been focused on making media voices exclusively progressive. And in addition, the extent to which it's coordinated with the political functions of this country, the Obama White House since 2009, is one of the most shocking things to us in our reporting. So this goes above and beyond just a simple, tax-exempt organization that's monitoring media. This is a tax-exempt organization that's actually changing the nature of politics and communications in our country.
Right. Now, but that opens up opportunity because if and then we've talked about this a lot over the last couple of years. Here's Media Matters says this, and then we see MSNBC go out and do this, or NBC News, or whoever else. And in some ways, conservatives, I think, have been pretty effective at showing, some of this sort of coordination and how it's made the mainstream media, so to speak, I think more and more irrelevant in many ways. In that sense, is Media Matters fighting, ultimately a losing battle?
Well, I mean, it's uninteresting and it's uninspired if everyone's using the same exact playbook for their news. I mean, you run an organization, a news organization, and that does great stuff. That's very unique, and we feel the same way. For us, it's a competitive advantage. We don't care.
Right.
Fine. Go ahead and use their talking points. But our goal in this whole process and this whole expose of what Media Matters is doing is to cast light on something that a lot of people probably didn't realize. And we've been attacked, by the way, for doing this from the left, saying, "Oh, look, you're exposing something that isn't that big of a deal." Well, we think it is a big deal. We think people need to know who wields influence in this country, and Media Matters wields a lot more influence than people realize, including even going so far as to the influence it wielded over campaigns that had to do with Glenn Beck, your boss. I mean, this is pretty.
Primarily, Media Matters has been funded by the Tide Foundation, and the Tide Foundation is an organization controlled and funded by George Soros, a multi-billionaire. This is the same George Soros that funded the Black Lives Matter movement, among other billionaires and millionaires. The Black Lives Matter movement was a way to get blacks disenfranchised every election cycle. Whether the New York riots, the Ferguson riots, the Baltimore, Maryland riots, all were funded by George Soros. Protest organizers were paid thousands of dollars to whip blacks into frenzies and burn black neighborhoods down. This is the same George Soros that worked for the Nazi Party in Hungary. This sellout Jew collected valuables from other Jews that were sent to death camps. Now it's time to expose all the millionaires and billionaires that fund Media Matters, this toxic left-wing news agency and news organization designed to influence all the media around America. Can you imagine one organization controlling everything you see, hear, and read about? Well, that's what Media Matters is. Media Matters for America. These are the chairmen and the people on the executive board. And it's time to expose this information before any more information is scrubbed off the internet. Right now, what you're about to witness are all the various millionaires and billionaires and foundations that fund Media Matters. Stay tuned for the latest results. When you see the Tide Foundation, that's George Soros. And you can see all of those people who have donated to this one organization to influence the media to support all the organizations that support billionaires and millionaires and their corporations. It's time for the truth to come out. Truth is crying in the streets. Before you watch ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, and CNN, it's time for you to realize all the millionaires and billionaires that are funding this one media organization. So when you're protesting about the millionaires and billionaires and complaining about how the millionaires and billionaires are controlling America, you need to look in the mirror and see how you're voting, because these millionaires and billionaires vote Democrat, and they lean socialist and communist because it's their objective to subvert America and weaken America from the inside out. All the while they make money off of the very politicians that they influence you to vote for. And this is the same Media Matters that got you into thinking that Republicans were the party of the rich, even though it was always the Democrats. Don't take my word for it. Here's the proof from OpenSecrets.org. And look at the Hollywood moguls, the millionaires and billionaires, all voting Democrat. Is it any surprise that everything you see on MTV, VMA Music Awards, and all the propaganda always leans Democrat and always supports the Democrat candidate? Look at all your celebrities and entertainers all voting for Democrat candidates and socialist candidates. Is it any wonder that we see no change happening for the poorest among us, of Americans who voted for the very same Democrats that the rich wanted, who control so much of our media? Democrat, the real party of the rich, pushing socialism and government rule by the rich few, keep Americans powerless and poor since the Great Depression.
There is quite an investigation out today, done by a team of reporters at the Daily Caller website. It claims that a controversial media group by the name of Media Matters for America is working hand in hand with the White House to manipulate some of America's largest news outlets, and doing so successfully. Here from the Daily Caller to tell us what he found, Vince Colanesi. He is the senior online editor and worked on this investigation. Vince, thank you very much for being here. First of all, what led you to do this? Because Media Matters is obviously a left group that has been very critical of many organizations, including Fox News, and you know, a lot of people believe, look, if you are on that kind of that side of the aisle, you believe stuff like this, and if you're not, you don't. So why get involved in it?
Well, we wanted to pull back the veil. I mean, obviously, Media Matters has been out there for a while. They were founded in 2004. And we felt like, Media Matters deserve some scrutiny. They spent a lot of time going after reporters. We've heard stories of reporters who felt intimidated by the way that Media Matters behaved towards them. Even Media Matters insiders who we spoke with claimed that they were intimidating reporters, that they would receive thousands of emails after a Media Matters hit on them. So we felt like it was pretty reasonable for us to investigate them. I mean, as a news organization, we wanted to expose what Media Matters is.
How did you get access? I mean, are these current Media Matters employees that you spoke with, or former?
It's a mix of both, and we also spoke with progressive leaders, Democratic leaders who are familiar with the organization and how it operates. We felt like we wanted to get a pretty comprehensive assessment for the way the organization behaves, and we feel like we did that. We had a lot of really interesting comments from people who said that Media Matters has a little bit gone off the rails, progressives who weren't too happy with the organization, and my colleague Tucker Carlson, who I shared this, really my boss, who I shared this story with, we worked together, and he's made some discoveries that they feel that some of these guys feel like they've spent too much time focusing on Fox. So we decided that we wanted to go after them and see what we could find.
By the way, for what it's worth, I had a Media Matters employee pull me aside once and tell me that he and a bunch of his colleagues really love Kelly's Court. For what it's worth. But let me ask you this. What interested me most about this piece is what you say is a coordination at the highest levels, almost. I mean, we're talking, you allege that Media Matters employees were meeting with Valerie Jarrett, who is arguably the president's closest advisor, one of them at least, among others at the White House.
That's right, and it's not an allegation. I mean, anybody can go look at this. I mean, this is actually sitting out there publicly. If you go check the White House visitors logs and go back to June of 2010, you can see that the head of Media Matters, David Brock, actually had a meeting in the White House with Valerie Jarrett, who is essentially the highest advisor to the President of the United States. This has definitely happened, and it's not just something that we allege. I mean, it's certainly occurred.
And what do we think the outcome of that is? I mean, what does that tell us?
Well, what we found out was that since the beginning of the Obama administration, that Media Matters has been in regular contact with the White House. Media Matters insiders tell us that they actually share a weekly phone call with the Center for American Progress and the White House, and also a weekly meeting between a lot of progressive groups that the White House attends and Media Matters attends. And in these meetings, they actually work on coordinating messaging to an extent. Now, as to what direction that flows, whether the White House is instructing these progressive organizations to do something or vice versa, is something we're still trying to figure out. But it's clear that their messaging is synced. Remember back to 2009, Anita Dunn, a White House communications director, goes after Fox News. It was a big deal. Obviously, you were part of covering that. That was a message that was the same exact message that Media Matters shared just weeks prior. The White House was pulling from Media Matters playbook. Now, Media Matters employees swear that there was no coordination at that time, at least to their knowledge. But as it stands, they chose the same line of attack going after Fox News at that time.
And you talk about how the Media Matters, pushing its message, which is very, very far left,
Sure.
that they have a lot of willing recipients in the press. Now, there's been some pushback today. Your article just came out. There's already been some pushback, in particular from Ben Smith, who used to be at Politico and now is at BuzzFeed, saying, you don't have your facts right on that. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have Media Matters insiders with intimate knowledge making these claims. We took these claims and we're providing them for public scrutiny. These are Media Matters employees who said, hey, look, we could rely on Ben Smith to be able to publish the things that we had. And we could rely on Greg Sargent of the Washington Post. And one of the sources that we had actually said, yeah, Greg Sargent's always game if there's nowhere else to place it. So they had allies in the media that they felt like they could always lean on if they had content they needed to get out.
And you're not just talking about left-leaning media. I mean, like, you talk about the Huffington Post. I don't think that would shock our viewers to find out that
Sure.
they were willing to post stuff from Media Matters. But you're talking about mainstream, media organizations like the Washington Post taking talking points from Media Matters. What evidence is there of that other than just these claims from Media Matters folks?
Well, Greg Sargent is a liberal blogger. He definitely has been available to Media Matters mailing lists and producing their stuff from time to time. That's not exceptional, but the fact is that Media Matters knows that it has places that it can get it. And when they get it to Greg Sargent, though he's a liberal blogger, they can widely tout, hey, we got this in the Washington Post, and they don't care what form that takes. They're able to tell their donors, hey, we got this in the Washington Post. I mean, they went so far as to claim, and you mentioned left-leaning areas, they went so far as to claim that NBC News' operation was writing their entire primetime lineup based on Media Matters content.
MSNBC. MSNBC.
Yes, MSNBC, that's right.
Not NBC.
Excuse me, yes, MSNBC.
Okay. You speak a lot about David Brock, who I don't think a lot of our viewers know, but he's the guy who essentially runs the show over there.
That's right.
And he emerges as an interesting figure.
He does. We opened the story by talking about an anecdote of David Brock at the end of 2010 was standing on the roof of Media Matters smoking a cigarette when his personal bodyguards, he had as much protection as a third world dictator, one of our sources told us, his personal bodyguards rush up to the roof and whisk him down, telling him snipers, that there's a threat of snipers. David Brock feared right-wing assassins. He has had this fear. He supposedly leads a very erratic newsroom.
And you're not using that term euphemistically. You mean actual assassins with guns.
That's right. No, absolutely. And he's hired personal security detail. This detail stands post at his home. This is pretty exceptional for somebody who considers himself a movement leader.
I mean, Vince, having looked at this group, is there something that you think needs to be done as a result of all this about Media Matters? I mean, are they, in terms of tax dollars, in terms of, just public awareness, or is it just a group that has an outlook, like a lot of groups that have an outlook, and is entitled to that point of view?
Well, we believe that they deserve scrutiny. I mean, as a journalistic organization, we believe that Media Matters deserves to be shown the light of day and let people judge for themselves. Now, you bring up the issue of tax-exempt. They are a tax-exempt organization, 501c3. Their proximity to the White House, their ability to coerce media, and really their efforts to try and destroy Fox News. And by the way, that's not just like throwing out a term. They really do want to destroy this network. Really does raise questions. Can an organization that claims tax-exempt status go after a media organization, a journalistic organization like Fox News, and try and destroy its business? They went so far as to try to destroy Ford Motor Company's business in their efforts to take down Lou Dobbs on CNN. This is an influential organization that's claiming tax-exempt status, and it deserves scrutiny.
Yeah. I mean, as far as the effort to take down Fox News, how's that going for you?